Thank you very much. My name is Charlotte Turner. I'm a social impact assessment specialist. I have been working in this area for 25 years or so, researching social value and its importance, as well as how to implement that for companies, charities, and founders and foundations. We're on my own company called Bean Research, which works with a variety of different organisations. I'm also the social impact lead at Cranfield Business School and teach on MBAs and MSc sustainability students about social value. So I'm coming at it from both a practitioner and an academic perspective, if you like. And I think it's important to, from an academic perspective, that we talk about this as a new paradigm in the concept of the outer circle, CSR, now known more as responsible business, emerging in the 1990s. The responsible, the business case for responsible business is really clearly made. It's one of the most written about areas in academia. But that purpose-driven corporate responsible organization is at the heart of this. Over the last few years, certainly over the last 5 years, there's been a growth of the ESG discussions in companies, the expectations put on a company by investors. So ESG measurement is an external framework put on the organization by investors. So you can argue the goods and the bads of that tends to focus on do no harm rather than how you create good. But what it has done is create the conversation from an institutional investors to the board about their overall responsibilities. And increasingly that's become conversations, and I've sat in on many conversations on boards, really asking the question, so what is the S in ESG? Environmental, if you're a listed company, is regulated. Governance is very regulated for every company. But what about the S? It's not regulated at all. A lot of people interpret it as people. But it wouldn't surprise you to know that I talk about it much broader than that. And I think it's absolutely core to the company. And I would put it the exact opposite of this paradigm, the other way round. It's important for me for three reasons. Firstly, from a government procurement perspective, in 2012, the government established the Social Value Act to consider social value in any procurement. That increased to, in 2021, that 10% of the weighting of any government contracts is based on social value. That means that £376 billion is being decided of government money is being decided, and 10% of that decision is about social value. It's really important, and 20,000 suppliers are already measuring and reporting because of that. And it's the human element that comes out really strongly. And if you haven't read Mark Carney, ex-governor of the Bank of England's book, Values, I would really encourage you to read it. That moves it from the S within ESG conversation to much broader. This is about rebalancing the dynamics of capitalism and really having clear social goals for every organization. It's not abstract. It's not a naive socially do-goody aspiration. It's absolutely core to where we should be heading. And Harvard Business Review also really talking about helping employees connect to what they care about, and what the organization they're working for is doing is absolutely crucial. And they have an awful lot of evidence and stats. In terms of the government definition and what they mean by social value in that 10%, they mean 5 things, and they really mean 4, but as it came into effect in 2021, COVID recovery slipped in there, which actually goes across the other 4 too. And this, I hope, illustrates the point really, that climate change is within that broader definition of what social value is. So is equal opportunity. And by that, we really mean the whole education and skills journey. So they're really asking about how you embed skills, how you support people into work, develop skills and in work, and to progress in work, as well as broader well-being. So if you look at it from an HR, an environmental, a community social point of view, all of those elements are covered by what government defines as social value, what companies have to report if they procure to central government, which both of these panelists do today as well. In my mind, I talk about it with students at Cranfield and also more broadly in different ways, really being able to think about what the purpose of the organization that you're working for or reporting to is, and then how you measure success against that. And I think that's really important. That this is a busy slide and it'll be shared, don't worry about all the words, but I think the key thing for me is define your purpose very simply and your ability to serve real people and society, and then develop that theory of change or that framework to show how you take business in your own words and deliver that in a net positive way. And then recognize that social value can be created in 6 different ways: through the projects that you do, the traditional community social projects, the places in which you're based and how you create social value there, how you create social value through your own procurement, your own people, what's the social value of your products and services, and of course also in your investment portfolio as well. So all of those different 6 elements really feed into neatly under P's, and that's why they're slightly strangely worded. But those 6 P's, I think, are really useful for when you're thinking about and sitting in your organization thinking, how do we create social value? Whether you're a charity, a social enterprise, or a company, that provides a lens to look through to understand what social value really means. The second box there is really about a theory of change and really thinking about what that is. That's again a language that's been used increasingly over the last 10 years, and people are using it for that very purpose, really thinking about what does success look like and how do we demonstrate progress against that. And I think if you impact framework, social value, social impact, and all of the different terminology, that's really what it comes down to. What are we trying to achieve? How do we measure success? And how do we report against that? Excuse me. And then in terms of theory of change and social impact, those are those 3 elements. Really, what are you trying to work towards? How are you achieving your vision? And then the outcomes that you want to achieve from short-term and long-term outcomes as well. And then the impact framework tells you how you measure that. So a theory of change is quite a useful starting point. I'm sure many of you would have already gone through that process, but and I know our 2 panelists have, but I think it's a really useful way to bring it all together and to demonstrate that organizational focus on social value. The other element it really helps with is when you go back to your 6 Ps, you can really check it against that. And when you're looking at a new procurement or developing a new product and service, you can, or a new community program, you can test it against that framework and against that theory of change. I was also asked to have a think and feed into this about what good looks like. I think you'll hear from 2 that are, but for me, it starts here, and it starts with the foundations of being really, really clear. I will also urge you to look at Deloitte did a very interesting project about 5 years ago, looking on different types of companies in terms of social value, really moving from a kind of let's maximize shareholder value. I think most people are on that contributor top right of really using external factors to help begin to start the process and moving that into integrating it into the business. Embedding and using that to procure and develop new business. Where it gets really exciting is then when you use that to innovate new products and services. And I think the 2 things I would say in terms of social impact assessment is to really make it sing, and what good looks like is to move it from being a purely reporting tool to it being a management tool that you can use to improve as well as prove. There are some fantastic social impact reports coming out and being published, but it really is authentic and embedded when companies are using that knowledge, and even more than they would publish, to really understand that social value creation across the 6 Ps and how they create social value, and then how they measure that and report on it. So I think that's the ultimate goal, just really understanding social value creation and maximizing impact. And that is applying whether you are a charity, a social enterprise, or or corporate. And of course, from a charity perspective, that's where it really started. It's definitely a journey though, and there is definitely not an end point. Every organisation that I've worked with over the last few years, it is on the journey, and really kind of keep going back to how do we integrate it, how do we embed it, how do we live it across the organisation. And we're going to hear from two organisations that are really living that. So let me stop sharing slides. I know that was a very quick canter through, but hopefully a useful introduction. And let me hand you over to Danielle King, who is a responsible business manager at Veolia, and has a very interesting story, and is on that kind of on that journey, I think is fair to say. Can I let you introduce yourself and tell us more about the process you're undertaking, please, Danielle?
Yeah, absolutely, Charlotte. Thank you. So first of all, morning to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be talking about such a topical area of business right now. And yeah, a quick intro from me. So Danielle King, I work in the area of responsible business for Veolia. And RB is, as we've just heard, actually, a really a core function that allows me to have a really good high level view of our business. And collaborate with many key stakeholders, both internal and external, around areas like climate, community, and employees, which of course social value is at the heart of, and should absolutely be at the heart of. And in terms of what Veolia does, from an external viewpoint, we have a suite of decarbonisation solutions across three core sectors, which are waste, water, and energy. And our solutions are driven by our purpose, and we have a specific framework that communicates and drives our performance globally to support a range of customers across every industry. So yeah, I think in answer to that first area, Charlotte, what are we trying to achieve, and how does that link back to social value? Okay, so I think it's a really good starting point to always look at the bigger picture. And I'm going to align a lot with what Charlotte has just talked about, and it is the reality of where we need to start on that journey piece. And what we've found, especially when working for such a purpose-driven organisation, is that purpose and values alignment is the first step in the process. So really delving into, the why and what is useful about what you do, for your stakeholders, is really where social value lives. A multifaceted approach to our strategy that aligns to our purpose of ecological transformation. And this model demonstrates the KPIs needed to deliver and achieve this purpose. And that model, it simply has 5 themes. We've got society as one of them, planet, employees, customers, and shareholders. And the obvious link here is around society, but if we really look at our value-based deliverables across all other themes, it becomes clear that social value isn't just applicable to society. It should be the common thread across all. So if we look at our own societal objective as a group, we centre this around job and wealth creation in the territories that we serve. So that's our objective. And for many years, we've reported this through a socio-economic footprint report globally, and then broken down via a country by country approach. And that's allowed us to assess our value contribution in GDP, and looking at direct and indirect employment, for example. But this is, it's only one angle. It's one side of the story, and it doesn't piece together every single activity across our business. And really, that's the journey that we're on right now. It's to measure consistently and to tell those impactful stories nationally, but really importantly from a local point of view as well, based on everything that we do as a business.
That's really interesting. And I think what in your journey, in your process, what impact has it had on you operationally as you broaden that out of your definition? How has that changed the organization?
Yeah, huge impact. You know, this way of thinking requires a whole cultural shift. It requires purposeful leadership from within. It's that bottom up and that top down engagement, values driven decision making, and it impacts decision making against, you know, who we want to partner with now, and actually how and what we want to invest in. And you know, quite rightly, as you said as well, Charlotte, you know, it's not always easy. There are always going to be challenges along the way around identifying, firstly, what is the direction that you want to move in, and you want to take, and really measure and understand. And I think, you know, just to share some, I would imagine some relatable examples. Not every business area may understand your objective around social value, and to begin with could be delivering it in different ways, which almost increases the complexity around measuring.
Yeah.
And it makes it more difficult to understand, you know, your position today and that gap to enable you to move forward tomorrow. We certainly found that at the beginning, you know, especially in a larger organization, it's trying to get control of what everybody is doing. And actually in a really similar way as well to the shift towards net zero. And the learning curve that many businesses have had to go through to understand their carbon impact, and detailing their roadmap to net zero. There has been, and there still is, a skills gap in this area, especially for SMEs. And you know, we can absolutely draw similarities between this and how, as a business, we demonstrate social value from our activities. You know, we've also got to make sure that our people are ready for this, but most importantly, understand why we're doing it. So that's, you know, taking it back to that bigger picture, and
particularly for the organization, the type of organization you are, as a global business in resource management, that involves a lot of different products and services, from waste and water and energy. Absolutely, you can understand the net zero, the social angle there therefore must be the same processes, as you said, in place, but it's a different issue to get people's heads around. Exactly that.
And it's identifying, you know, what that looks like, and then ensuring that there's support there, to really close that skills gap, so that everybody feels like they can move forward.
And how do you do that? What's next for Veolia? How do you build that skills gap and really kind of think about job creation and wealth in an organization like yours, which I assume has fairly tight margins?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, it's that impact piece. We really want to understand that, and you know, it's important to say that the social value and the impact are different things. You know, we can look at the here and now, we can look at that data, but we also want to understand in the future, okay, what does that story look like? What are the impacts that have been created from activities, which isn't just data driven, but we can see change happening and it's meaningful. So we really want to get to that point more, and you know, really continue to develop that societal objective that I discussed at the start. It's very high level, but if we actually deep dive into job creation and wealth further, then what do those areas mean in isolation, and what more could we be doing around wealth? How does that link, for example, to the cost of living crisis, and things that we could be doing as an organisation? That's very interesting, isn't it, then, from a social value creation?
point of view, and then social impact becomes about how you measure the elements that you put in place to create social value. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me bring in Frankie West, our other panelist, if I may. Hi, Frankie.
Hi.
Frankie is head of bids at City and Guilds, and can talk a little bit about how you implement that in practice. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit in kind of practical terms what how you've implemented it, how it's embedded into your procurement processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, lovely to have you all here this morning. So yeah, as Charlotte mentioned, I head up the bids team at City and Guilds, so I'm a bit on the kind of coal face, I guess, of actually seeing some of this come to light in terms of the requests that we're getting, in particular from public sector procurement, so those kind of government local authority bids. I guess I've been lucky to be on that journey in City and Guilds with colleagues as we kind of developed our social value measurement framework. So it might be useful just to quickly talk about what we've done in City and Guilds, and then I can share, you know, what impact and benefits that has. So using that theory of change kind of framework actually that Charlotte referenced earlier, City and Guilds have developed a social value impact measurement framework which aligns to our purpose, and we use that framework to consistently apply and measure the impact that we have across the business. So as a skills organisation, the focus of our impact measurement framework is really about the impact we have on individuals who might be kind of benefiting from that skills training or qualifications accreditation that we offer, the impact that has on organisations, so giving those skilled individuals to those organisations, what does that mean for them? How can they service their skills needs, productivity, and then therefore the overarching impact that has in society. So that is how our impact measurement framework is developed. And we've actually been lucky to have some really great traction with our executive team who've really understood and seen the benefit of doing this and using that impact framework. I guess from a kind of an individual perspective in terms of motivating staff, but also, and this is probably where I come in a bit more, in order to win new business. Yeah. And we've been able to create kind of annual impact reports, which we publish online using this framework, something that we committed to. And we've been spending a lot of time trying to embed this in the business. So we've developed online training for all staff to access to explain what social value is, the benefits of having an impact measurement framework, and getting people to really think about it in the day-to-day. So actually, you know, you might not be that closely aligned to working on the kind of social value side of things, but actually individuals and staff may well be able to see oh, this kind of product or service or this new set of training that I'm developing, actually if I were to ask a few questions at the end for those learners or the organisations that are benefiting from it, that could really give us some great momentum in terms of impact. And through that, we've kind of really got a great toolkit, which we have developed to use with teams to help them to kind of embed that into our products and services. And yeah, it's been a great start, but there's lots more to do, I guess, to continue to embed it and get people to engage and understand what more we can do, really.
And on that, are you starting to see? I mean, you've been doing this for a few years. Are you beginning to reap those benefits that excite the exec team?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Charlotte mentioned earlier, actually, that public sector procurement, since 2021, it's been kind of a minimum of 10% weighting in bids. And actually, we've seen it higher than that, 15, 16, 18%, sometimes a couple of times in tenders. So the expectations are definitely growing. So it's mandatory in public sector procurement, but we are seeing it on the private sector side as well, actually, which is a bit of a shift that we see maybe over the last year. But the work that we've done in City and Guilds on that social impact measurement has really helped us to support us to win some larger contracts. So I think being that step ahead and kind of having some of those measurement kind of information there already really supports to be able to evidence, actually, we've done this already, and we can really tell the story around what we've done and what we're hoping to achieve as well. So yeah, it's been really good and has had a real impact in our ability to win contracts. And I think it's also helping in those day-to-day conversations with customers as well. I think, you know, whilst it's mandatory in some areas for procurement, there is more interest out there generally. So even if we're not having to tender competitively for something, customers still want to understand what we're giving back, why work with City and Guilds, understand the outcomes of that. And that's really helping us, I think, to get more kind of input from the exec team, more buy-in, and helping us to win more business overall.
It's hard, isn't it, to get that balance right between some of the reporting. We can talk a little bit about this, the reporting mechanisms in a minute, the different reporting mechanisms and the kind of very data heavy driven and telling that narrative. Can you share any kind of how you've brought that to life? You know, what are your top tips? How would you kind of bring to life what you're asked about in bids, and how you go about it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because some of the questions can be really, really variable. Obviously, there's those different kind of key areas that Charlotte showed you on that slide earlier, in terms of different areas that might be asked about. So COVID-19 recovery, tackling economic inequality, climate change, equal opportunity, and improved well-being. So you can get questions from any of those areas, and sometimes they are quite specific. So I think the way that we've done it is we've tried to target it in kind of two perspectives. Think about this, we would think about it in terms of specifically for the contract that we are bidding for the work that we are trying to win, what are we trying to achieve out of that? So what outcomes do we want to achieve? What do we think would be important for the customer as well? So maybe understanding if they have their own social value or impact measurement approach, trying to align it to that as well, so it resonates with the way that they are looking at social value. And so then really bringing that to life in terms of, if you can, you know, actually trying to create some commitments. So for this contract, we will, I don't know, for example, bring in new apprentices or create new skills to be able to service this contract, and to be kind of thinking about the outcomes of what you might be able to achieve at the end of it as well. I think also then backing that up with the evidence of where you've done it before is really key. And that's where that work in advance of creating your kind of approach and actually starting to measure really, really helps. So we tend to think about what's on our pipeline, what do we think we're going to be bidding for, or maybe re-tendering, a contract coming back around again and we need to win it again. What's coming up? Are there specific products and services there? Is it in a specific location? That type of thing, and starting to build up some of that measurement early really helps, because then you have the evidence. We've done it before, we can prove that, you know, we're over and above what others are doing, and then we can link that in for that customer in terms of what they're looking for in the future.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Let me bring Danielle back as well, and perhaps we can have a few questions from the audience too. I can see some coming through, but I think one particular is a little bit about measurement, and we haven't gone into too much detail around the framing, and we could do that on another day. But what are the mechanisms that maybe you could start, Danielle? What are the mechanisms that you use on social impact measurement? I mean, there's so many to choose from, aren't there?
Well, this is the thing, and I think it stems back to right now, we are doing so many different measurements across the business that the next step for us is to get that platform implemented, which brings that all together so that we can start to look at the measurement across the whole business.
Yes.
So right now, in terms of what we've had, and we've had for many years, is that socio-economic footprint report. But it tells one side of the story, and that's been recognised now. So it's really about, okay, how do we now understand and take forward everything else that we're doing from across the business? And really, to do that, you know, there's got to be a platform to capture and to give you that data.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? The difference between value creation and footprint. And you're right, if you just show the impact that you have, you don't tell the story and the narrative that Frankie was talking about too. Jen, is there any other questions that have come through? I've got lots more, but maybe there's some. Let's hear from the audience. What else has come through?
No, I think you captured it. If anyone needs anything clarified, in terms of clearly social value is clearly evident and important, but I think someone was just speaking about the social value aspect of things there. There was another question there on what are City and Guilds doing? City and Guilds is developing their approach to responsible investment in line with our responsible business agenda. This is really a priority for City and Guilds. It includes reviewing ethical exclusions and where investments create social or environmental harm. But if you do have any questions on this, please contact our responsible officers, Julia Bana, and you can certainly follow up with me separately after this to put you in touch there. There's no problem.
I think there's one more question from this end that I've seen come up about the kind of future of what social value looks like from your point of view. Shall I start with you, Frankie? What do you think? It's evolved so quickly, as you say, over the last few years, and you're seeing it more from the private sector procurement as well. Where's it going from your perspective?
I mean, I think it's only going to become more important. And yeah, as you say, absolutely, the private sector, whilst it's not mandated, there is a lot more interest there. So I think it's definitely developing there. I think probably where we'll see a shift, or we're starting to see a shift, is previously when we've been kind of bidding and asked questions around this, it's, you know, an ask on what our commitments are, and that's it, never followed up on. So, you know, don't promise. I mean, you could promise the world, obviously don't do that. But we are starting to see actually that being measured. So when you win that work, there's an expectation that, you know, that doesn't just disappear, that there's reporting on that, that you're actually sharing the impact and continuing to review and update that over time with that contract. So I think, yeah, more of a focus on, you said it, do it.
Do it, and what happened next?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What about you, Danielle? Where are you seeing? I mean, we talked a little bit about kind of footprint to value creation. Where does that take an organisation, a huge organisation like Veolia?
I think it speaks volumes when things become very topical, because that usually means that there is an element of change, and people are learning and implementing. So I think in terms of what the future looks like, then it should be normalized. It should be aligned with business purpose. It should be central to how a business carries out decision making. We can't underestimate how responsible businesses are in tackling, you know, social, economic, environmental issues. And you know, we are in the center of communities. That's where businesses are. So it's really about you know, understanding what's happening around us and understanding how our business can make that impact, and that should be normal. That should be part of every day.
And absolutely, and that's where, while I kind of slightly moan about ESG from an external perspective, it is really helpful for initiating and accelerating that discussion about your overall responsibilities and how that lands and works. But I think we've got a question come in about small charities. So I talked to them at the beginning about the fact that this is applicable to corporates and down to social enterprises and to charities as well. I think actually charities, from my academic research on this, charities really led the way, you know, in terms of really understanding what social impact was under pressure from funders. It's now an explicit in Charities Commission expectations as well. So I think that's really clear. I think a lot of charities, they start with the impact because they have an organizational purpose very clearly. That 10 years ago, it was okay for a charity to talk about their charitable intent, and that's not enough. And I think while this conversation has been about a corporate approach and with a procurement angle from Frankie, I think this is this is still applicable to any organization in terms of really understanding how you create social value alongside how you measure it. So taking those two, as Danielle said, the two differences of social impact, social value, it's used interchangeably in practice, but really they are different things. And I think charities started particularly with, what do we need to measure? And what are the impacts, and what are we under pressure from the funders? And perhaps the conversation is going more towards how do we create social value and then be able to report on the whole of that. The specific question about a small charity, the purpose is already focused. Of course it is, absolutely, with the charitable intent. And how do you apply this? I think that my advice, and then I'll open up to the other panelists, but my advice from a small charity's perspective is really focus down, not what your funders are asking you to measure and suggesting you measure, although take that into account, but really focus down on, what are you trying to look like? What are you trying to do with your purpose is clear, but what does success look like in 5 years? And then how do you measure progress against that? And I think once you've done that, then you'll see those key impact and important issues come up. City and Guilds we're talking about from a procurement angle, it is actually a charity too, isn't it? So Frankie, have you got anything else to add in from that point of view?
I mean, I think you've covered
it.
it really well, Charlotte. I think it is, I mean, our impact measurement framework wasn't really developed for procurement purposes. It just was very handy in that it appeared and it was starting to become a requirement. So it absolutely was, for us, focused on that initial, what is our purpose? What do we want to achieve? Where do we want to be positioned and seen as an organisation, as a kind of charity? And that's how it developed. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with what you said, Charlotte.
Yeah, and I think the theory of change and the social impact framework is where you do that. Danielle, I know you work with a lot of charities as well. How are you seeing it from their perspective?
We're all in the same position is really what I'm seeing. We're holding a lot of collaborative meetings right now with our charity partners, with our trusts, to really unify this and really have that common foundation in terms of how we move forward and how we can communicate what we're all doing together. And that's happening right now. And I think that's the starting point. It's getting everybody around the table and collaborating in that way and identifying those challenges and what we can do together.
That's really interesting. I think we've had another question in from John, talking about kind of paying for the achievement of social impact measurements through employment contracts. So that's really interesting. I had a big debate yesterday in a board meeting where we were really I was going in to talk about social value, and we ended up talking a lot about into employment measures as opposed to sustained employment. And I think, to me, from a social value perspective, and often charities and organizations are measured, and the indicators under the outcomes are about into employment. It's true too for City and Guilds, looking at skills and how you use that into employment. Into employment is great. It doesn't tell the whole story. We know if people have barriers to work, and getting them into work is a fantastic achievement. But if they stay for 6 months, then we know their health, life, success outcomes are going to be so much stronger. So that sustained employment, it's really hard for organizations to measure that. But I think in investment terms, if you're in the employability space, that is a really good investment, because it's really about being able to demonstrate that you don't bounce back out of employment. If you take young adult carers, for example, 50% of young adult carers say that because of their caring demands, they have had to leave a job. So if you're working with those sort of people with barriers to work, and you get into a job, any funder or organization on an employment contract, to whether it's DWP or a charitable funder, really needs to be able to show sustained employment. From a government contract perspective, every government department has a different definition of sustained employment. So I could happily share with them, but MOJ, DWP, Department of Education all have a slightly different definition. But I think the point is to try and move from not just into, but sustaining that. Any other questions? If we're just finishing off, I think it's very nearly 10 o'clock and I don't want to take people over.
We're going to get a quick poll up as well, Charlotte, before we lose everyone, but thank you for today.
No problem. Should we finish there then? Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Please do send your comments and suggestions. This is started as an overview. We really wanted to kind of engage on the social value issue, and we can do follow-up ones in a bit more specific detail if there's an element that people want to see. I think a poll has appeared up, so please do fill it in. I'll say that for Jen, but from my point of view, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks to everyone on the panel today for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.